I think anytime you enter a new decade in your life, it really starts to make you reflect on your life, how it's been going, what you've accomplished, and makes you look forward to what you want to accomplish ahead. And I think turning 40, which I recently did, it's more of an emphasis on that than probably a lot of the other ages you've experienced so far. And so I've been thinking a lot about my life, particularly my reading life, and then I just happened to come across this video from Lady of the Library where she went over kind of 10 of her reading mistakes in her reading career or trajectory. And I thought this was a great idea for a video, and I'd kind of already been thinking about these things, and so I put together a list of my top 6 mistakes or maybe even regrets. Now, you've probably heard the saying that when you look back on life, the things that you'll regret are more things that you didn't do rather than things that you chose to do. And I would say making this list, that definitely rang true for me. So here are my 6 biggest mistakes or regrets, and hopefully you can use this video to not make these for yourself. I think first and foremost, it's just having not taken reading more seriously when I was in school. Now, I was really lucky to go to a private college preparatory school, but I mostly got in because of legacy admission. I was a terrible student all the way through elementary school, middle school, and right into high school. High school was absolutely no exception. I was very bad at math, and reading and history and language was always a little bit more of my stronger suit, but in general, I was just a pretty poor student. Most of this comes down to the fact that I had severe ADHD that was completely undiagnosed because this was the late 90s, early 2000s, and my parents basically thought that ADHD was fake. It was this thing, made up by the medical industry to sell more prescription drugs. To demonstrate how bad of a student I was, I actually failed my freshman algebra class, which is pretty embarrassing. And the last day of school, the teacher kept me after class and he said, "Look, you didn't pass. I really should not give you a passing grade to push you through to the next level, but you were such a pain in the ass in my classroom. I do not want to have you again next year, so I'm going to give you a passing grade. Good luck." And when you're 14 years old, you think, that's awesome. Now I don't have to repeat a grade or deal with the embarrassment from my peers or get hassled by my parents for failing. And you start to realize later, like, this was really bad because math just builds on each other. So, to go into the next level of math, if you don't have the fundamental algebra skills, it just makes life very difficult. But in English and languages, I tend to do a little bit better. And I was always put in actually the advanced classes, but I still didn't take it that seriously. I basically got by on my natural ability to understand the subject material. So a couple years ago, when I started making book content, I thought it would be really fun to reach out to one of my teachers from school that I kind of stayed in touch with and ask her, "Hey, do you remember the curriculum that we had? Because I think it would be fun to look that over." And she said, "Yeah, I've never, thrown away a single year worth of curriculum. I know exactly what I taught each year that I taught it." And she gave me the list of books, and I basically remembered almost none of them. In fact, one of the books on the list was The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. And I reread that 2 or 3 years ago as an adult, and I had no idea it was a reread. I thought I was reading it for the first time. And so I clearly just didn't really pay that much attention all through high school. Now, I think no matter what, as a high school student, you're probably just not going to have the same retention or understanding of a lot of the books that you read because you just don't have that much life experience. But if I had paid more attention and really engaged with the books on a deeper level, I think that would have made me a stronger reader as an adult. And of course, I had no idea that I would maybe someday become a influencer. That wasn't even a thing when I was in high school, but it would have made my life now a lot easier. And kind of just adding to this whole idea of being a better student, I wish I had pursued literature in college as well. When I first enrolled in college, I did one semester studying English because I thought I wanted to be a journalist, but everyone told me that that was going to be a waste of time. I mean, even back then in the early 2000s, you could kind of see that writing and reading was on the decline. And I eventually switched to a business degree and then a communications degree with a specialty in video production, and then I eventually dropped out. My second big regret is I would say wasting time on personal development and self help and even business books. So I started my own business in 2015. And when I opened that business, I had really no idea about entrepreneurship. It was kind of a weird situation that led to me opening a business. But the real estate agent that helped me secure the lease for the space we were renting, he gave me a gift to celebrate my business opening, and it was the E-Myth Revisited by Michael Gerber, which is actually a fantastic business book. In fact, when people ask me for recommendations on business books, I just say, go read that one, don't worry about the rest. And the problem with that is it was such a good book that I thought, wow, business books can really change your life. And so I went down this rabbit hole of reading all this personal development and business stuff. And I had kind of unknowingly started with like the creme de la creme of business books. And so nothing really ever compared since then. And I just went through so many books trying to dig out these kernels of knowledge or wisdom or finding a hack or a secret that it was just a big waste of time. To be honest, most business books and personal development books could probably be reduced to a 1 or 2 page essay, or sometimes even just a single paragraph. Now, that's not to say that all business books and personal development books are bad. It's just that they're really overblown. And I just know these people that go from book to book to book, and they never really implement anything that they read about. And there's a great saying that's everything works, but nothing doesn't. And what that means is like, there are so many different ways to do anything, and everything that you try will probably produce some results to a certain extent. But the worst thing you can do is doing nothing, because nothing will produce 0 results. So even if you read a book that has a system in it or an idea in it that isn't really the best, if you try to implement it, you will get some results out of it, and at least you'll kind of learn what works and what doesn't work. But if you just go from book to book and never really implement any of the things that you learn, you're just gonna get nowhere. And a lot of times these books are about similar topics, but they have very different approaches to how to accomplish those goals. And so it doesn't really benefit you to read both of them because you can't do both. And a lot of times people will take a little bit from this and a little bit from that. But the thing about systems is they need to be done as they are prescribed at first, because then you can test it by changing one variable at a time. Where if you just make this hodgepodge approach, you never really know what's providing the results for you. And I went through this myself. That's how I know that this is a kind of a dangerous trap. And I would say I've learned more about the world and just understanding how the world works and how to communicate, which I think is like a better skill to have than how to do a specific thing in business, from reading nonfiction books about history, about psychology, as well as a lot of fiction, and just learning more about the world through fiction. And that brings me to regret number 3, which is not prioritizing more fiction. So around 2017, I started to say, I want to kind of go back through some of the big classics that I might have missed along the way, or books that I've potentially read and just forgotten about. And I started to mix in more fiction. And it's to the point now where I would say probably 90% of my reading is fiction versus nonfiction. I still love nonfiction books. I think they have a great place. And of course, nonfiction is a very broad term that can apply to a lot of different types of books. But I think the thing about fiction is it makes you do a lot of mental work in kind of imagining the worlds that you're reading, imagining the characters that you're reading. And it's probably the closest we can get to putting ourselves in other people's shoes and seeing the world through their perspective, which I think is probably one of the most powerful exercises that you can do as a human being, and also probably one of the biggest issues that is dividing our nation here in the US and just dividing people in general across the world. We seem to be in a place where we literally cannot find any common ground with one another, and so it's pushing each other farther and farther away into more and more extreme groups. This might sound corny or insane, but I truly believe that we would not be in this bad of a situation if people read more fiction. And the thing with nonfiction books is, like, a lot of times people think that reading is about gaining knowledge, and that knowledge is a piece of information that you didn't know before and now you know after, and it was told to you. But that's not always how knowledge works. In fact, we can take the idea of knowledge, and I think it encompasses wisdom, and you get wisdom through experience. And I think fiction gives you an experience where a lot of nonfiction just tells you the end answer. And for me, the difference is, like, do you get more out of hiking a mountain to see a beautiful view, or having someone describe what the view looks like to you? This is kind of the problem with AI, specifically like generative AI, where it's like we teach kids that it's about the journey, not the destination. It's about the process and not just the end result. It's like when you learn a new task or a new skill, you suck at it at first, but then you practice over and over and over again and you get better at it. Where with generative AI, the big pitch is like, oh, you can create anything that you can imagine, but there's no process there. There's no skill to be learned. There's no knowledge or wisdom to be gained through the practice of sucking at something and gradually increasing your skill. We are literally just saying with generative AI, the only thing that matters is the end result. You want to think up a beautiful painting, well, the computer will do it for you. And I kind of think of a lot of nonfiction books, of course not all, in the same way. A lot of it's just like, here's the question, here's the answer to that question. There's no process of change or experience that you go through as a reader while you're reading. And I think that's just something that fiction does a lot better, and I really wish I had prioritized more fiction over the years. Now, my fourth regret is not taking more thorough notes. I've actually been a note taker with my reading on and off throughout most of my reading life. Definitely not in high school, obviously, based on what I told you earlier. But when I was reading books about training athletes and running my business, I was taking a lot of notes on that kind of stuff. But then in 2017, 2018, when I did start working more fiction back in, I wasn't really taking any notes on the fiction I was reading, which I really wish I had. And then since I started my BookTube and Bookstagram accounts, I've been taking notes on the fiction that I read somewhat selectively, or maybe just intermittently by chance, where I really should be taking more thorough notes on everything that I read. I guess you could also say with this regret, and this is something I can still remedy with some of the other stuff, I can't go back in time, but I really do need to come up with a more solid system that I can just rely on quite frequently. I have a commonplace notebook that I use for some of my books. Sometimes I highlight and take photos, and then I just put those photos into Google Drive. I've tried apps like Notion that I've never really been able to integrate into my workflow. I tend to use them for a short period of time, then I fall off. So I really should just schedule some time to really come up with a solid system that's easy to use and I can do consistently, but I just haven't gotten around to it yet. I will say that I've been saved a little bit in this regard by the fact that I make videos or write articles or reviews about everything that I read, or I'm talking about it with other people. So that's really helped me to get more out of the books and remember more of it, especially key details or takeaways. But in general, I do need something that I can fall back on, that I can pull up years later and quickly look at and have it kind of rekindle those thoughts. And this segues perfectly into my fifth regret, which is not joining or starting a book club much sooner. Now, in my own defense, I did try to start a book club around 2015, but I made the grave mistake of picking Moby Dick as our first book club read, which is a challenging book to read just because the language is pretty antiquated, and also it's very dry in the middle part, no pun intended. But that's not a great book for a book club pick, particularly if you are just kind of getting people together who maybe read casually or haven't been reading for a while. So basically everyone fell off within the first couple weeks of doing the club, and it never really went anywhere. But we have an online book club now, and you probably noticed, or maybe you haven't even noticed, that in all of these videos, I don't ever do sponsorships, and that's not because I don't have sponsorship opportunities. It's because I'm very picky about the people who I want to promote and the companies that I want to promote. So really, I make most of my money as an influencer by running this book club. And it's funny, like some people have weird feelings about paying for a book club, which I understand, but this is such an amazing community. And I'm not just saying this because like this is a pitch, but every single time I get off a book club call, I feel high. I literally feel high on life, as corny as that sounds. Next time you're out in public, just take some time to like look around. Don't take your phone out of your pocket and just observe everyone around you and just see how freaking addicted everyone is to their phones. And you will realize that we don't have a lot of interpersonal time face to face with people anymore, where we're communicating with people about a specific subject with no distractions. That's what Andy and I get every week when we do our podcast, which is why we both love it. And that's also what we get every week on our live book club calls. We're just sitting down talking about one specific thing with no distractions to a group of people who share our interests and our passions and our experiences of having just read the week's assigned reading. And every single time I get off one of these calls, I just think like, I wish everyone could experience this. This is so good. I just wish everyone could experience this. There's been a few times where we get into reading the book and I'm not really loving the book that we're reading for the book club, because most of these I'm reading for the first time along with the other club members. But it's the conversations that we have about the book on the live calls or just in our ongoing Discord chats about the club reads that just make the reading experience so much better. And these conversations have also made me fall in love with books that I was not liking, because through the conversations that we have on the calls, I've realized there's a lot more to the book than I realized. Or maybe somebody brings something up that I had missed, and that rekindles my interest in the book that we're reading. Now, of course, you don't have to join our book club. There's other online book clubs. You could check to see if there's in-person book clubs near you. But yeah, I just wish that I had joined a book club or started a book club much sooner, years ago, because it has just brought so much joy to my life. And honestly, it's the highlight of my week. Maybe that makes me sound lame and my life sound boring, but it's true. I really look forward to book club. And I honestly just feel so elated when we get off the calls. If you do want to support the channel and you also want to get high on life with us, the link is down below. And of course, aside from reading the monthly reads, there's a lot more going on in the club. There's additional videos. There's people doing smaller group reads together for other books. There's a whole bunch of stuff. Giveaways, discounts, you name it. Okay, and my sixth and final regret is not being more discerning in my reading, and I will also add my purchasing. When I first started making book content, I just went nuts. I was like, okay, I'm making videos about books, so this gives me carte blanche to just spend as much money on acquiring books as I want. And I just went crazy. I was going out to different bookstores every weekend and spending hundreds of dollars just getting a whole smorgasbord of books and grabbing books that sounded mildly interesting or had an interesting cover design, reading one little bit on the back and throwing it in my cart. I wasn't going after any specific genre or style or fiction or nonfiction. I was just going full shotgun blast on this stuff. And then it got even worse, where people would reach out and say, hey, can I send you my book? And I would just say yes. And now I have books showing up for free, and I have books coming out of my ears. Now, if you love books, you love collecting books or reading books, this might sound like a dream to you, but it does become kind of anxiety inducing after a while for a few reasons. Number one, you start to look at all these books and you think, I'm never going to have the time to read all of these in my lifetime. And of course, you now have books sitting on your shelf that you are mildly interested in, and at the same time, you are coming across books that you're very interested in that you want to acquire, and now you feel guilty about acquiring a book that you're very interested in because you have books that you're only somewhat interested in sitting on your shelf. I also learned pretty quickly that just talking about books broadly was a bit of a failing strategy in terms of social media growth, because people who are interested in romantasy probably aren't interested in translated literature. People who are interested in Business books probably aren't interested in grit lit. There may be some overlap in those readers, but it's pretty minimal. So that I realized if I wanted to build a legitimate community around my social media, I really needed to speak directly to specific people. So at this point, my primary focus is literature. That's still kind of broad because that's not Russian literature, that's not French literature, that's not American literature, that's not literature from a specific time period. But broadly speaking, literature is the vein I'm most excited to be in and the type of readers that I want to attract to my community and my club and just my greater social media presence. I do still read some narrative nonfiction and some history, which I talk about occasionally as well. But in general, I wish I'd just been a little bit more discerning in my reading and in my book acquisition. Because at this point, I've had to do several book unhauls, and I still feel like I just have too many books sitting on my shelves that I'll probably never get around to. So there it is. Those are my big 6 regrets. I would love to know if you have any reading regrets or mistakes that you made and what they are. You can share them below. And see you in the next one.